Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's good to see some old faces out in the crowd. So welcome to committee. Committee members, welcome. Staff, welcome too. I'm filling in for Chairman Mason today, and I'll try to muddle through this. So anyway, so I missed yesterday, but we're going to do the hearing on Department of Children and Families, and we're going to start out with public testimony. And with that, we're going to start. Audrey Schrimmer. Audrey, thank you for coming to committee today, and welcome.
Sorry. So I am Audrey Schramer, the Executive Director of Three Rivers Center for Independent Living. And we thank you for the opportunity to present information in front of the Budget Committee today. The Centers for Independent Living, there are 10 of us across the state of Kansas, and excuse me, I think that we are the social service group that a lot of people have forgotten about. People don't know about us until they need us. So we are working at getting people better educated. Along with that of educating people comes the issue, then we have more referrals. So our referrals for Three Rivers, which serves the 12 counties in Northeast Kansas, took a huge jump this past year. We had 200 more referrals than we normally would in a year. So that's the good and the bad. We definitely want to help everyone that we can, but there's certainly a need to have adequate funding for our centers. So I wanted to share a little bit of information, some of the highlights from services that makes those a little bit unique. For example, Three Rivers helped 9 individuals get out of nursing homes, return back to either their home or an apartment setting in their community of their choice. 4 of these individuals are not on HCBS and receive no other type of services besides their Social Security. So there really is no other entity that helps individuals except for Centers for Independent Living do this. We also helped 25 youth do transition services. Those are designed to help youth with disabilities who are in the school system as they transition to adulthood. So this is rather new. In the last couple of years, we've been able to focus more on youth services. And it's a stretch with our dollars, but it's the one the staff beg us to keep continuing because it keeps them energized. They really enjoy working with the youth, and it's good for all of us to have that. So, sorry. To share a little bit of information, the 10% increase is in the governor's budget, so we're requesting that the committee support that request. For Three Rivers, we get more grant funds than some of the other centers, so this will be a significant increase for our center. It'll allow us to hopefully be able to hire a full-time individual, which could be up to 60 persons additionally served that we currently aren't able to do. Now, for some of the other centers, which you'll hear their testimony, the 10% isn't really going to help them as much. So we're asking for adequate funding for Centers for Independent Living. We hope that the committee can help make that happen in the future. So thank you, and I'll be on.
Committee questions? We'll take questions.
Okay.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Is Mosaic then in Finney County one of the CILs, or do you know who is out west? Who would it be out west?
West would be if you're all the way in west, that is Link, Living Independently in Northwest Kansas. They have, 38 counties?
Southwest.
And Southwest is mostly Link as well. The Beyond Barriers has part of that. I apologize. I guess in my testimony, I didn't provide you with the map. I know that Jill has that map with her testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Can you get us that map? Mm-hmm. Very good. I mean, not right now, but at some point. Oh, very good. Thank you for that. Very good. Committee, further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here. Next, we have Gail Kozad. Gail, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carpenter and members of the committee. I am Gail Kozad, CEO for Kansas Children's Service League, and we serve as the Kansas chapter for Prevent Child Abuse America and have been serving children and families in Kansas for 130 years. So as our role in Prevent Child Abuse, as the chapter for that in Kansas, I always want to come and talk about the importance of prevention and working with families early before child abuse is able to occur. Science shows that providing stable, responsive, nurturing relationships in the earliest years of life can prevent or even reverse the damaging effects of early life stress with lifelong benefits for learning behavior. Data also shows that children under the age of 3 are at the highest risk of death due to abuse or neglect than any other age group of children. If the primary reason for that is that they don't have as many people that may see them on any given day, so they are not in classrooms often. They may not have other people that are involved in their lives, and often they don't have the ability to speak about what's going on in their family. And so being able to have an additional set of eyes for those families that maybe are at higher risk helps support them. Home visitation is a key strategy for supporting families and preventing the need for foster care. Healthy Families America is an evidence-based intensive home visitation program which is provided by KCSL. The program promotes positive parent-child relationships and healthy attachment and assistance to help the family gain economic self-sufficiency. So families are visited at least once a week for the first 6 months that they are enrolled in the program. We can serve them up to 3 years. The home visits are a dual focus where we are working with the parent on understanding child development and better parenting skills, but we are also working with them on their skills and their goals, most of them geared towards self-sufficiency in the sense of education or employment. And so we help them with things like interviewing, filling out job applications, helping them get connected to job training, and at times, if they come to us without their high school education, we will work with them towards receiving their GED or their, yes. And so we have many families also who go on and go towards an associate's degree or towards a bachelor's degree and move into employment. Parents are primarily referred to KCSL with their consent. I always want to make that clear. This is a voluntary program. They are referred by hospitals, by OBGYNs, and other parents. They are referred to KCSL because they're struggling with one or more of the following risk factors. So these are parents who are at higher risk because they might already be using substances. They may have mental illness that is not treated. They are unemployed. There might be domestic violence in the home, and often there's unresolved trauma from their own childhood. In other words, these are parents that suffered child abuse as children as well. Despite these risk factors, in 2022, 97% of the children that we served in this particular program were not placed into foster care and remained safely at home. We know prevention efforts are more cost-effective and efficient for children who are able to remain safely at home. With a return of investment for every $1 spent in home visitation, you will save $5 in other expensive costs such as special education, foster care, and juvenile corrections. And I want to ask this committee to consider increasing funding for child abuse prevention services, specifically KCSL's Healthy Families Program, in the amount of $972,000 to serve an additional 75 families. And I will stand for any questions.
Very good. Thank you. Committee questions. Representative Droege.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick clarification on this. Prevention efforts are most cost-effective. Weekly home visits, an average cost of $12,960, and foster care is $31,000. is the 12,960, is that just monitoring? And if that's the case, is the 31,000 also just monitoring?
So
We're not talking like aid, like other.
correct. Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. Yes, so that does not include any other costs that the family might be accessing, such as cash assistance or child care assistance or anything like that. And so the cost for Healthy Families is an average cost per year to go into the home weekly and provide those education and support services. I will let DCF clarify for sure on the foster care, because I did some quick numbers based off of the budget that they had proposed just for foster care services and the total number of children that were in care to give a rough estimate. Absolutely.
Any further questions? Representative Clifford.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You're asking for a 10% enhancement then, over and above the 9.8 million that you already get? Is that correct? I'm just trying to do the math here. But does someone know where this is in the budget right now?
We do not receive 9.8 million. So currently, we are in the DCF budget in 2 locations. We are under TANF, where we receive 3 million from the TANF dollars. It's just a little bit under 3 million, but right about 3 million, or might be 3.1. Anyway, and then also in Families First, Prevention Services Act, and so I don't know what pages those are on in the DCF budget.
I was just doing the math on 748 families at 12,960 each. That was the 9.8. And then you were asking to serve 75 more, 10% more, $900,000 enhancement. Does that make sense?
It does make sense how you came to that. So, yes, so part of this is the first year is always a little bit more per family as we're looking at expansion, and then what happens is that cost per family starts to go down, and so we receive total and all funding between DCF, the Children's Cabinet, KDHE, and other private sources, about $6.5 million total.
And my daughter's to teach for CSL.
For our Head Start program, yes.
In Oklahoma City now, so thank you for your work. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Committee, further questions? I have just one very quick one. So the map on the other side.
Yes.
So the green, these are just different areas that you serve under?
So the map that I have there is where our current services are. The colors are coordinated to the dot. So, for example, in Lyon County, we have an office in Emporia, but that staff serves Lyon, Chase, Greenwood, and Coffee. And the same so that's how the colors are connected.
So where it's striped, then they would be served by 2 different?
Yes. Yes, and that is partly due to funding. The funding sources for that particular county comes often from different streams of funding, and so we serve them slightly differently. Yep.
Okay, very good. Any further questions? Very good. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being here. Next, we have Rachel Marsh. Rachel, who is no stranger to this committee and has worn many hats in front of this committee.
Many hats. Happy Valentine's Day, and thank you for inviting us to share our thoughts on the DCF budget today. As Chairman Carpenter mentioned, my name is Rachel Marsh with the Kansas Children's Alliance, and we're an association of 19 private nonprofit child welfare and family service providers across the state. Our members represent a diverse array of services, programs, and outlooks from the very beginning of a child's potential involvement in the child welfare system all the way through the highest level of care, which might be psychiatric residential treatment facilities. Sorry, I started to get a bug in my throat. We do support the governor's budget proposals for DCF, and we want to point out the extensive efforts that DCF has made with the support of this committee and past appropriations committees in Family First Prevention Services, in investment for financial support for kinship families, and last year with investment in our child welfare workforce. We have heard positive feedback from our members about the workforce investments, and we have seen a substantial decline in the number of youth in foster care in Kansas over the past recent years because of this legislature's commitment to funding and DCF's execution of Family First Prevention Service grants. Unfortunately, there are critical issues in the child welfare system that are not addressed in the proposed DCF budget to the way that our members would like to see, and I would like to share with you some of those concerns and let you know that we worked throughout the last half of last year, 2022, had to think about that, to really figure out, okay, it's easy to have a concern, but what is the solution to some of the challenges that we're looking at? Last year, our membership got together and we started thinking about what are the most long-term challenges and the most important things we could work on as an agency over the next 5 years, because child welfare didn't arrive in the state that it is in today overnight, and we will not change and transform our system overnight, but we need to be looking long term. There were really two main issues. One is preventing the number of children from coming into care, and the second is focusing on youth with complex needs, and the third is our workforce. You'll see reference to all of those three primary issues agreed on by members across the state and all of our counties that work with children and families. First, I want to point out that Kansas has an unusually high number of older youth entering foster care. This is something that we have been trying to study. Why is this happening in Kansas? Why do we have a higher rate of youth out of home in Kansas than we see as averages in the rest of the country? And where we see the difference is older youth entering foster care. What we have found in doing some research in our files and our referrals is that we're not seeing these older youth enter foster care because of child maltreatment necessarily. We're seeing them enter foster care because of gaps in our community services for juvenile justice, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and mental health care. And so the challenge for us is that by the time a child is involved with the child welfare system, you all and the public rightly expects that they're going to receive the services that they need. Unfortunately, foster care was never designed to provide those specialized services. We were designed to partner with our communities. So when those communities are not don't have the capacity to meet those needs, neither does the foster care system. So we're here today to point out some things that we can do differently in foster care, given the realities of some of these gaps in our communities. The first item is that DCF, when we're very excited that they've done this, they have established a new licensing level for therapeutic foster care. So therapeutic foster care is sort of the highest level of care that you can have while you're still having a child in the home in a family-like setting. Above therapeutic foster care, you're talking about congregate care settings and psychiatric hospitalization types of care. We want to see that we have more and more foster parents equipped to care for and heal youth with higher complex needs. But we need more than a licensing level. We need program development for that level. A child placing agency who's seeking to grow their therapeutic foster care program will need costs covered for things like in-home therapy, for therapies that are not currently covered on our state plan, for attendant care for before school or after school, so that we can make sure that children during their most likely challenging transition times don't disrupt or experience a crisis. We need respite care. We need a statewide recruitment plan, because the nature of the children entering foster care is different than it has been in traditional long-term history. And we need targeted trainings so that not only the foster parent is equipped to serve this youth with complex needs, but the workers that are working with the families also have that specialized training, whether it might be autism or juvenile justice or severe medically fragile youth. We need our workers to know also how to support those families. So we're asking this committee to add $6 million to the DCF budget to help fund therapeutic foster care program development, so that when a child does come into foster care because they are a youth experiencing complex multi-system needs, we have foster parents who are prepared to care for them. And then they have some figures on how I arrived at that $6 million number. A large portion of that is real-time crisis response. We need 24-hour care, so our therapist foster parents can actually call when they need it and help can be available. The second piece that we're asking for is services for youth with delinquency behaviors. Some of you may have heard, and because I've been here before talking with how after we had a policy change in our juvenile justice services in Kansas, we have seen an increase of numbers of youth with juvenile delinquency behaviors being referred to foster care because there's no other safe place to go. So they don't go to detention, and they can't stay in their families because of safety concerns. So judges have taken to putting some of them in foster care. To the extent of 500 youth were placed in foster care in fiscal year 22 alone for delinquency behaviors. The challenge is we are not criminal justice trained specialists. We are social work specialists trained in child maltreatment. Additionally, even for sort of generalist criminal justice, there are known evidence-based programs such as functional family therapy, multi-systemic therapy, family-centered treatment that are the right course of action for those particular youth, but we're not able to access those services because they were sent to us as an alternative to juvenile justice services. So juvenile justice has these types of programs, but then they send the children to foster care and they don't get those services because they're in foster care. So we need to bring those services into foster care where those children are placed. So we've asked for $4 million for the DCF budget for that. And finally, we talk another population that we're seeing that is new is youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You may be familiar with, those of you who sit or happen to sit on the Special Legislative Committee on Intellectual and Developmental Disability Waiver Modernization, that they're looking at a community support waiver. And we really support this because we want to see children who have IDD needs served in their communities, not entering foster care. But that waiver is a long time out. That's 1 to 2 years away before you could begin that. Then we're looking at the wait list, and then we're looking at actually getting those services to children and families. We want to focus on the population of youth that their families could keep them home if they could get attendant care, but because we can't quite at this time rely on our Medicaid system to provide it, we're asking you to have the DCF system help provide it. If they're facing high risk of entering foster care because of IDD needs, how can we stop that and get them services in the home immediately, regardless of provider? Finally, so sorry, on the workforce issue, what we're asking for this year to build on what happened last year and with our workforce, the dollars that you were able to help sustain our workforce during a really critical time, is that we are at the end of a federal grant program called Can Coach. 5 years ago, the federal government partnered with KU and partnered with case management providers across the state to do some research about supervisor training in coaching skills. And so what we've learned as we've looked at workforce issues in child welfare over the long term is that the most primary indicator of whether a social worker will stay is whether they're satisfied with their supervisor, is the quality of that supervision. So we've seen positive return on the Can Coach supervisor coaching program, but the federal dollars are ending, and now we're looking at that sustainability. And so we'd be asking this committee for $750,000, and that would be to the Children's Alliance, and not because I'm looking for more to do necessarily, but because the steering committee for the Can Coach program has identified the Children's Alliance as the right place because we do represent a diverse group of child welfare providers and we are a neutral source. We could help facilitate that program and implement it statewide without having to worry about who gets the grant to do that. The steering committee has recommended the Children's Alliance for that. So thank you for listening. Some of you are new faces, so I wanted to go into some detail, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Casey?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you for your testimony. Just a two follow-up questions. My question is, in total, you're asking for, is it 12.7 million roughly?
12.75.
12.75. And follow-up question to that is, does this reflect today's inflation rate, or is it just something normally you guys normally ask for?
Oh, that's a great question. I appreciate that. That is what we think it would cost to do business today for those services. So how I calculated some of them is I figured out what is the hourly rate we would need to actually retain a worker, and then I multiplied it by the children that I thought we could reach in that particular program, and that was how I obtained those figures for each category.
And in regards to, in regards to your staffing level, what is your staffing level right? Are you guys at 100%, or you guys have like a high turnover in staffing? What's going on with your staffing?
I'm sorry to let you know, child welfare workforce is a crisis nationwide. It can be from 20% up to 40 or more % turnover in any given year. So during the COVID pandemic crisis, the workforce was even more shattered. And so we took what was a longstanding big challenge and we turned it to a crisis. So therefore, your committee last year supported our workforce by a one-time incentive payment, and it really did boost the morale and help our workers kind of feel like, okay, I can stay in, and also was able to help with some recruitment efforts. So today, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So workforce continues to be a long-term challenge, but we believe it's the quality of the supervision that we need to focus on today, so that the job is easier and better supported as opposed to some other factors we could focus on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm not used to saying Vice Chair. Regarding the CAN coach, this is the first time I've heard about this, and that's exciting. I know I've spoken with several of the foster care agencies, and specifically with St. Francis. I met with them one-on-one about my concerns about the lack of supervision of their case managers, and they never mentioned anything about CAN Coach. How long has it been in existence?
CAN Coach started about 5 years ago, and one of the challenges, and I have to be frank that the number figure here has allowed for a limited number of participants, so they haven't reached every supervisor, and when they do work with the supervisor, it's quite a lengthy monthly, multi-month process with first training and then fidelity monitoring and then follow-up. So I can imagine that you may not have heard of it even just because of the number of programs and services a provider might be putting into service at this time. Nonetheless, we have spoken with our members and they are in support of expanding that. Or this would not be an expansion. This number is the current amount. And so if we wanted to expand it, we'd have to have a higher ask.
Another question. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Would all of the members be required to engage in the CAN Coach?
How I would see it, making it up on the spot, is that we would talk with members who were interested, but right now it's limited to child welfare case management providers, and so we have child placing agencies and residential homes who would really like to see this type of training occur. So what our role would be expanding it from that more narrow network and offering it to a broader segment of child welfare providers.
Yeah, because my concern would be more with the foster care providers with that, because you know, the decision-making that's involved without having a supervisor on the spot is, as you know, we've seen, there's many issues with that. So, but would that be one of the goals?
Sure, I think that's to be very frank, that case management work is the hardest work, in my opinion, that we have in social work, and so it's the highest subject to turnover. So that is where we most need to focus on our supervisory skills.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Any further questions? Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will look at this again. I'm looking at your youth, which you say are unusually high number, they're older into foster care. And so in the process of looking at that, is the therapeutic foster care connecting with that or not?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. I would say that it is not specifically limited to that. There might be a 6-year-old who might enter care with the types of needs that some of us really can't imagine until you actually hear the story. However, the trends that we're seeing is that the older youth and the youth with juvenile delinquency behaviors or complex needs, they're experiencing the most placement instability, and that's where instead of getting help, you actually get your symptomology worsen. So we really need those youth to enter the therapeutic foster care program as it's developed.
So then my question would say, what specific program might you have to work with this specific population?
With the older youth population?
Yes.
Well, right now, we know, as I mentioned, that we did the review of our referrals. We know that 500 of the youth came in with delinquency behaviors. And what we know works for youth with delinquency is one of 3-4 programs, depending on how broad you're scoping that. One is functional family therapy, one is multisystemic therapy, one is family-centered treatment, one is a foster care model called, I just blanked, treatment model treatment foster care Oregon model, sorry. And so one of those would be specific to the therapeutic foster care, but it's really the complex and wraparound care that a therapeutic foster parent would need. They need on-call crisis, they need attendant care, they need case management planning, they need specialized training depending on the types of youth that are coming in. So it wouldn't be like this one child, there's not one program, it's the set of services that currently really we wish we would have existing in our community that need to layer on top of each other to ensure that support of that family. Because right now a child placing agency can try to support, but it's really one worker responding to a call. But one worker can't be everywhere all at once.
Now, this is my last question, Mr. Chair, and part of this is a difficult one here when I'm looking at it. When we're looking at $6 million for therapeutic foster, and then we're looking at $4 million for services for youth, $2 million for targeted, and $750 for the CAN coach. When we have multiples, I always ask, what is your priority?
You know,
Besides all of them.
Representative, I think you asked me that last year, so I was prepared. Our priority is therapeutic foster care program development. Because with that $6 million, it would have the most flexibility for the highest needs youth and to remain safely with families. But a very, very close second would be the CAN coach supervisor coaching supports.
Thank you. Okay, so the $6 million for the therapeutic, and you said the very close one was what, please? I'm sorry.
The CAN coach supervisor training.
The CAN coach.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that doesn't mean because I asked the priority, that's how it's going to go. But at least when we have multiples, because so many people ask for various things, it is nice to know where your priority really is. Absolutely. And yes, I did ask you that last year. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Any further questions? So would the answer, if I asked you which one was your priority, would it be the same for me as it is for Representative Ballard?
You know, I'm already wishing I could have another priority because of I just have to say this because I feel it would be irresponsible not to say it. We are experiencing safety concerns for other foster children and social workers in the field because of youth with delinquency behaviors. And so we need to make sure that those evidence-based practices that are currently outside of foster care, that we currently have in Kansas, are leveraged and brought into the foster care system. It's just because we have silos and funding streams that we aren't providing it in foster care when we could be. So but it's just an opportunity to add a comment. Thank you.
Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So you just said something that triggered me on a question that I have too then. You referenced the safety for others. Who are the others? Are they in some of these homes already? And what are the primary safety concerns that you're seeing that you're worried about that are our reality?
Unfortunately, with the level of need of youth that are sometimes entering care, and this is not a large number, but it is a very high intense need number. We are seeing referrals for rape, for attempted murder, for drug use, including distribution of drugs with fentanyl. We are seeing children that can't be placed with other people, but we don't have a place to put them, so then they're just left without a place. We have seen social workers severely harmed. We've seen social workers with their teeth knocked out who had to have multiple surgeries and who left the field. The safety issues are real for our workers and for the foster caregivers.
Just a follow-up. So the kids are being raped, or the kids are the ones who are raping someone else?
Unfortunately, for the youth that were being referred to, we're seeing those youth that have been charged with sexual assault referred into foster care.
Any further questions? And just for clarification from my own, so the money that you're asking for will be shared for all your members?
Sure. What we were asking for specifically would be to go, the first three would go specifically to DCF for them to distribute in their budget. And for the last one with Can Coach, that would be sort of designated to DCF to flow through to the Children's Alliance.
And then I missed yesterday, so is CALM in the governor's budget?
Sir, no, it is not. But they are very happy, and they're seeing some really great progress with their grant that they have this year.
I know last year we funded them.
They've got some really great stories. Unfortunately, I asked them back in December, and I forgot what they said.
Okay. Any further questions?
My question is all their budget going under DCF per se, or is it individually to each agency? That's my question. In terms of the recommendation, any recommendations that we...
It would be in the DCF.
DC, okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none. Rachel, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, next we have Jill Dudley. Jill, welcome to committee. Executive Director of the Independence for People with Disabilities. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm happy to speak before you. Two of the committee members, my center belongs to their districts, so I always love a chance to talk to our legislators. My name is Jill Dudley. I'm the Executive Director of Independence Incorporated. Audrey did a great job talking about what the Centers for Independent Living do, so I just want to add a little bit of information. So Centers for Independent Living serve any person that has a disability, any age, any type of disability. One of the things that makes us unique is many or most of our staff have some type of disability, so they bring their lived experiences to the table, which helps them support other people with disabilities in the community to reach their goals and live the life they want to live, which we should all be entitled to. There are 10 centers for independent living. We cover the entire state of Kansas, as you can see on your map. One of the things I want to talk about are some concrete examples of what we do and how we work to fill gaps in services. So obviously there's a big difference between being completely independent and needing HCBS level of services. And the wonderful thing about our IL grants through DCF is those grants allow us to pivot and really support people in the way they need us to support them. without like fee-for-service contracts where you can only provide a very specific service. And so that's why those IL grants are so important, because obviously we want to support people to be independent so that they're where they want to be in life and they have less reliance on higher level of services. And that's what those IL grants do for the Centers for Independent Living. Some examples. So a student with a disability is transitioning out of high school. They're trying to decide what they want to do next in life. They can meet with my staff. They can talk about what options are for post-secondary. Do you want to go into a certain field, go into employment directly? Do you want to go to a university, a community college? What does that look like for you? So then if they meet with my staff and talk about what those goals are, where they want to go, but there's some barriers in their way, my staff can work with them on scholarship applications. They can work with them on college applications, employment applications. An example, we had a student that had enrolled in Johnson County Community College, and they were worried about transportation. They were worried about where their classes were on campus. And so my staff worked with them on where does the K-10 Connect pick up students? How do you catch that? My staff rode with them on the K-10 Connect to the Johnson County Community College campus. They went around and found all their classes. They caught the K-10 Connect back to Lawrence so that person felt comfortable and was independent to attend college classes in the fall. Another example is we support our local businesses. There's the hospital is a great example. They do accessibility surveys that they need for their reaccreditation. My company comes out and does that accessibility survey so they can be reaccredited. We recently had a business contact us because their website was not accessible, and so my staff assisted that business owner in resources of how they could make that website accessible. Who do they contact? What does that take? How much will this potentially cost you? So that their website could be accessible for everyone. When there's a natural disaster or a crisis, the pandemic is an example of that. Obviously, transportation and lots of places closed down. So we had lots of individuals with disabilities that were like, how do I go get my groceries? How do I get any type of commodities? So my staff stepped in. We contacted individuals to let them know that if they needed commodities picked up, that we would go pick them up and deliver them to their homes. IL grants allow us, again, to pivot so we can do some of those things quickly. Same with ordering groceries. If they could drive and go pick up their own groceries, but because they're a person with a disability, they didn't want to actually physically go into the grocery store, we helped them set up their online accounts so they could order their groceries and then drive through and pick them up. So those are just some concrete examples of what we do. The governor's budget includes a 10% increase for the Centers for Independent Living, which is wonderful and a step in the right direction, but a 10% increase is $10,000 for me. Which is helpful with inflation, but really that is just going to cover the change that we are experiencing in benefits for our employees. I would love it if someone would champion the Centers for Independent Living and ask for a higher percentage, because obviously even 20%, I could do more with 20,000, like potentially hire a part-time person to assist with service delivery. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee, questions? Seeing Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're talking about the 10,000 and what the 20,000 could possibly be. You know, when we look at Centers for Independent Living, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What's really unique about CILs?
Yeah. I think it's very unique that our IL grants allow us to really work with an individual one-on-one based on what their goals are, that it's very person-centered planned, and the fact that if there's something specific that's a barrier for them, we can work with them one-on-one about how to get through that and work to the other side, and the fact that most of our staff have a disability, so they often understand systems at a different level because they live it, and that's really helpful for people.
How many are you serving right now?
So this last year through my center, we served over 1,300 people, right around that. And that doesn't include, so those of you that live in my area know that we have an equipment loan bank. And so month to month, we probably have 50 to 90 people that come in a month for equipment loan, durable medical equipment that they can borrow from the center and then return. It's free of charge. But as far as people that set goals with us, that we work with one-on-one, that 1,300 number is correct.
And you also provide transportation?
I do. That's unique to my center. So Centers for Independent Living, as part of our contract, are required to offer at least 2 other services, and that's one of my other services that I offer. So I do provide transportation in Douglas County only, and something else that was kind of unique to Douglas County, transportation closed down, so I was actually the only transportation provider that was transporting COVID-positive individuals to the hospital or to doctor's appointments during that time. And that's what makes us unique, too. Again, we can kind of pivot.
Thank you. That was my
Thank
next
you.
question, but you took care of it. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, the Center for Independent Living is another option. You don't have to go to nursing homes. You can stay in your homes. And part of that is you're meeting your consumer where they are and what they need. And you don't have to have a whole group of this and this and this. If you only need 2 services, you get 2 services. And
Correct.
you kind of take care of all of that in the process. Am I correct?
Correct. And it's based on what that individual is telling us they need. So, you know, if somebody comes in and says, this person needs this, this, and this, we want to meet with that person directly to make sure that's actually what they want and what they're wanting assistance with. We always talk about we're walking shoulder to shoulder with someone. We're not ahead and pulling or pushing from behind. It's really about what they want.
Thank you. We hadn't talked a whole lot about Centers for Independent Living, but most of them operate about the same way. You just happen to be in Lawrence, Kansas, but most of them, wherever they are,
Yes.
operate pretty much the same way. Am I correct?
You are correct.
That's great. So it wasn't just Lawrence, Kansas. So
No.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Ballard, for the testimony.
Thank you. I appreciate it also.
And you are more than welcome.
I know. Well, I was going to ask you, she stole my thunder, but just for everyone's, so the next line for these folks that you're helping is the nursing home.
It depends on what level of disability they're experiencing. I mean, obviously, we want people to stay in the community. We all know it's a much cheaper option. It's a happier option. People want to be close to their family and friends. So we work really hard to make sure that we can assist people in staying in their communities. And it makes our community better. You know, we want to normalize the fact that any one of us, just by aging, could age into a disability. It is part of the world.
Thank you for that. In a committee meeting here last summer, I believe, I said publicly, what is a SIL? So since then, I've been on a little bit of a fact-finding, thanks to you folks, about what a SIL is.
I heard that, which is why I'm here.
So anyway.
That got back to me.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Committee, further questions?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. And Representative Ballard, there was nothing nefarious about me saying a testimony or anything. Okay.
You sure about that?
I am. Next, we have Dawn McWilliams with Boys and Girls Club. Thank you for being here. Topeka Boys and Girls Club. Okay, very good.
Thank you. I am Dawn McWilliams with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Topeka, but I speak before you today on behalf of the Boys and Girls Clubs across Kansas. We are 12 organizations strong. We have over 70 sites in 19 communities across Kansas, including on the native land and also youth centers on the military installations as well. Just a little summary. We are an out-of-school time provider. So for kids who need us, we are there before school, after school, when school is out, during breaks, and during the summer. We serve school-age youth, primarily 5 years old, as long as they're in kindergarten, to 18 years old. Our focus is to support youth in the development to be successful in school, to live a healthy lifestyle, and to grow into productive, contributing citizens in their community. As a whole, Boys and Girls Clubs across Kansas last year served approximately 18,500 youth across the state of Kansas. Out-of-school time looked a lot different during COVID. We responded by providing remote learning centers across the state for youth that did not have access to technology, that did not have access to supervision and needed a safe environment to be able to participate in remote learning and to be successful in school in those most uncertain times. In addition to that, it's important that we support the family. We primarily serve all youth, but we are proud and privileged to support those kids who need us most. And we define those as kids in foster care, kids who are homeless, kids who live at or below poverty level. And so all of the supports that are necessary during out-of-school time become essential for those youth. 83% of a school-age child's waking hours is spent outside of school. That's a large portion of time in which positive influences, a safe environment, as well as supportive, caring adults is needed for youth to make the right choices, as well as to be supported to be successful in their decision-making. Our focus for today, we are very grateful for the Department of Children and Families' infusion of TANF funds to our organizations across the state. We believe that we have been excellent stewards in reaching those kids who need them, who need us, and their families to be successful in the community. However, just as many individuals who have come before you earlier, the economics have really changed. The cost of service delivery has increased. We have weekly requests to expand the number of sites that are offered and provided around the state. Our most recent expansion happened in Emporia. The Boys and Girls Club of South Central Kansas expanded to 5 school-based sites in Emporia to provide out-of-school time services for those kids. I can speak specifically for Topeka. Within the last 4 months, we have been requested by Jefferson West to provide out-of-school time services. They believe that that is a direct tie to their economic success. They've had a number of businesses move in, but there are no options for parents, for kids when they're out of school. We have also been approached by Topeka Public Schools within the last 2 weeks to open up 3 additional sites in 3 schools that are identified as Title I schools who have the highest percentage of kids that live at or below poverty level. Our cost per services have increased because it's been necessary for us to attract and retain quality staff. Because of the population of kids that we serve, we are very passionate about all kids deserve a safe, affordable, accessible place to receive quality service when they're outside of school, regardless of their inability to pay for those services. And we provide an immediate gateway to those children. Again, I'll speak specifically for Topeka. Just within the last year, we have had a 25% increase in homeless youth. We have had a 10% increase in youth in foster care. And as Rachel had alluded to, one of the fastest growing programs that we're seeing at our club and clubs across the state are teen services for middle schoolers and high schoolers. Those kids are needing a safe place to help them evolve into productive citizens in their community. Our goal is to really help wrap ourselves around those kids to not only be good decision makers and live a healthy lifestyle, but create a plan for what happens after they graduate from school. Workforce readiness is a major priority of Boys and Girls Clubs across Kansas, really helping to have kids know what options are before them. Obviously, for a lot of the kids that we serve, they don't see that within the own homes that they live. Many of them have not even been outside of their neighborhood area of their school. And so it's really important to us to expose them to all of the incredible opportunities that they have as young people so that they can be successful. Excuse me. One of the examples that I wanted to share with you, and I know Representative Ballard has attended numerous times, is we have a Youth of the Year event each year where each club competes for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Kansas Award. And those are teen members who are identified in each one of their respective clubs as being a role model and example of the Boys and Girls Club. They are thriving academically. They are facing adversity. They are making positive choices, and they are a role model to their peers. Just wanted to share a couple of fun facts with you. I just got this before the meeting, so you don't have this on your notes. We have 6 candidates that are competing. One of those youth wants to go to University of Kansas to be a chemical engineer. Another youth wants to go to University of Missouri to be an orthodontist. Another youth wants to go to Fisk University and study mathematics. Another youth, K-State, to study business. Another youth would like to go to Stanford to be a political activist. And we have another youth that would like to go to University of Kansas, so that kind of wins out of those 2 state schools, that would like to be an attorney. And so that is a very small example of how our kids dream in the pathway for success that they are heading towards. And soaring over the barriers that they are faced with and that they have no choice or option to be in, but because they belong to the Boys and Girls Club, they are provided a pathway to do so. Our request is for an increase, as I indicated. Department of Children and Family infuses us with $2.6 million of TANF funding to reach those families who need us most and those kids. With the increased cost that we're experiencing to retain and recruit additional staff, to be able to increase our capacity to the number of kids that we can reach, we don't have the ability to do that right now. There are a number of changes on the radar that are going to be affecting our revenue portfolio that include changes to the Department of Education's 21st Century Grant process, as well as ESSER funds, which is providing us funding to help with tutoring and specialized academic support for kids that are trailing behind in school to help them catch up. And so we're looking for funding in 2024 to address those costs specific to academic support, as well as reaching those kids who need us, despite the inflationary costs that we're experiencing. And then in 2025, an additional $780,000 so that we can continue our commitment to serve kids across the state of Kansas who need us most. Happy to stand for questions.
Thank you for that. Committee questions. Representative Reeves.
With some of the decreases that we're seeing in the TANF, how is that going to affect your budget?
We have not been advised if there is an impact. We have Department of Children and Families is an incredible collaborative partner in regularly meeting, brainstorming, discussing, identifying needs. We're hoping we're walking into this budget year with 2.6. We have not been advised of a decrease. Don't surprise me, Secretary Howard.
Don't faint. Another question?
One of the other things that I wanted to add to, and I know that you have heard this, and I applaud you for the investment that you've made in mental health in schools. I wanted to go back again to 83% of time for kids, waking hours, is spent outside of school. That mental health care does not stop. Since COVID, we have all had to respond in a way that helps kids be successful in the club, because for so many families, the club is the last opportunity that they have. We want to make sure parents stay employed. We want to make sure that we're lifting families up to be successful. We have had to hire a social worker. We work with the universities across the state. I can speak specifically for Topeka. We have 6 social work interns every semester that help us with social emotional groups. And we have social emotional aides that help kids to regulate when they need to, take a break, and also receive specialized assistance during program time for them to be successful. Those are additional costs that we didn't have pre-COVID, but are highly necessary, again, for the very same reasons that you've heard, and we're very generous in recognizing in the mental health system, as well as in schools, that those monies are needed to help kids. Those supports are also needed outside of school.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We hear about the shortage of child care facilities, and that's one of the things we hear a lot about. And I think Boys and Girls Club has always provided a certain level of child care, after-school care especially, and sometimes in the schools and various other places. Have you had an increase in the number of families that you have seen with their children?
Yes, ma'am, and that is a really great question. This is the very first year that I have been contacted by more chambers, more business leaders, specifically business leaders asking to partner with us as they expand their business or bring people back to work, if they can create a partnership for their kids to receive services so that their employees can come to work. It's unfortunate to share that what we're seeing is we have to have kids on waiting lists right now for spots until we're able to expand the number of staff we can hire. Additional space is needed as well. Again, with all of the changes that kids have experienced over the last 2 years, club environments, schools really need to operate differently, higher staff ratios, smaller group settings, and really allowing that social emotional support. So I can tell you specifically for Topeka, we have 3 club sites that have approximately 89% of families who are at or below poverty level that have a waiting list between 10 and 23 kids waiting for a spot. Our direct access gateway right now that has impacted that movement has also been the increase in homeless youth as well as foster care kids. We have partnered with the city of Topeka for Impact Avenues and work very, very closely with Topeka Public Schools. So as soon as a family is identified in Impact Avenues and they have a school-age youth, that youth immediately comes to the Boys and Girls Club so the parent or parents can focus on everything that they need to, getting a job, a residence, getting healthy, treatment, etc. We also partner with the DA's office for any youth who is in school, whose family has been exposed to violent crime, to really help address some of the repercussions of those crimes. Is to immediately get that youth into a safe environment, and that's the Boys and Girls Club. Because both of those numbers of youth are going up, that adds to the waiting list of families who need a spot, which is why we continue to have schools ask us for additional sites. We have one particular site that is within a 3-mile radius of 2 elementary schools, and Topeka Public Schools wants us to open up sites in each one of those schools to help support the need of school-age youth, just to kind of show you the need that exists just in our community.
I have one other. I'm looking at the statistics here. You serve 18,541 youth, and 63% of those are urban, 5% suburban, 18% are rural. and 15% military. So it's a very diverse population that you have, as well as the meals. You have 74 Boys and Girls Club sites in Kansas and 818 volunteers. All right. Now, you say you may have space problems of how do you find enough facilities to handle this?
That's when we need to partner with the schools to then open school-based sites so that it is convenient for families. And it allows for a closer collaboration on the needs of those youth because you have the out-of-school time partner working in tandem with the school to make sure there's consistency 360 degrees around that child's life, which is, we have in Topeka 11 school-based sites. Every year we have a superintendent ask us for more school-based sites. And we are also negotiating every year with each principal for more space because it's necessary for increased capacity levels.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So just a quick question for you around not just the funding, but the cost to send someone are the parents paying a fee? Is it tiered based on if a
Yeah.
or how do we get subsidized for folks that can't afford some level payment?
Yes. One thing that's very unique to Boys and Girls Club is we do not turn away any child for their inability to pay. But we also want to work with families on their responsibility for care. And so we do have a tiered system. However, probably 92% of the kids that come to Boys and Girls Clubs of Topeka are scholarshiped some way because the parent can perhaps only pay $5 a week for their 4 children. But we know that those children need to be in a safe place. And so that's where our fundraising efforts elsewhere are activated to make sure that those supports can be provided. I would like to give you an example of our teen center. Very unique setting. And in order to attract teens, because all of our teens come on their own volition. They drive there, they take the bus there, they walk there, they're from the neighborhood. And we know that we have to teach them about financial responsibility. Club membership for a teenager is $20 per year. And we have some teens that they are very proud to bring in $1 a week for their club membership card. But we do not turn any family away. All of us, I can speak for all of our clubs, have very aggressive resource development specialists that are regularly working, in addition to the CEO, to raise funds to make sure that we have a very diversified revenue portfolio. The comment that I made earlier about the change in 21st century grant funding is going to be very detrimental to us because they have eliminated the ability for us to actually charge membership fees. So in order for us to apply for 21st century funding, we have to eliminate any charge whatsoever. That affects Lawrence, Kansas in a way to almost $1 million of lost revenue for their clubs. It also kind of goes against kind of really where we're trying to get families to budget and understand their role and their care for their kids as well. And so really creatively kind of taking a look at how we even manage walking into that opportunity, because it is beneficial funding that, again, fosters the relationship between a school and a club for out-of-school time. But that is a very different, unique perspective that is a requirement this year.
Just a quick follow-up question, because you brought up something I didn't know about, the 21st century funding. Who requires that?
That comes through the Kansas State Department of Education.
And that requirement disincentivizes, is that what you were saying, parents to be able to contribute, or they can't contribute? Because
Correct. That is a requirement of the grant. If you apply for the grant, you have to agree that you will not charge membership fees. You will not charge any fees whatsoever. The complexity that that also puts a Boys and Girls Club, we have been very much recognized by the Department of Education for our ability, once 21st century funding is exhausted, to sustain those sites. I'll give you an example. We have a site that 21st century ended over 5 years ago. It's still operating. The membership fees is an attribute to that continuing. And so how we look at applying for that and then our ability to commit to a sustainability plan becomes increasingly more difficult.
Well, thank you for that, because I know when I was growing up as a kid, my parents struggled at one point in time, and if they were disincentivized to contribute eventually, I feel like that would have taken away a little bit from them, because they were really motivated to be in a situation where they could get to a point where they could pay for things, and which helps the rest of the people who maybe at some point in time need it. And so who do we need to work with then to come up with a better plan that doesn't disincentivize families, or makes it harder for you all to make money too, doing it, assuming you can get it? Where does that Century funding come from? How do we work with that to get a partnership to make that,
Would that be
adjustment?
Secretary Watson? Randy Watson, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Committee, further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Tammy Thomas. Tammy is she's the State Director for Safe Families. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. That is just right there, isn't it? Vice Chairman Carpenter and the members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to come and share our progress with Safe Families in the state of Kansas. I'm very proud to report that since January 1st through December the 31st of 2022, Safe Families for Children has been assisting in preventing 127 children from experiencing the trauma of removal from their families and placed into foster care. None of that would be possible without your support. First, for some of you who may not know, you're going to say, who is Safe Families? Safe Families is a volunteer-driven, professionally supported movement serving Kansas families in crisis and beyond. We focus on family preservation. We are not foster care or adoptive services. Parents that we engage, families we engage, maintain parental rights and full custody of their children. We desire to, you hear all of these things with what's going on in our state. It's our goal and our desire to engage with families prior to DCF involvement. We connect vulnerable families with a qualified, vetted host family. Our CEO and founder, Dave Anderson, made a statement. He indicated, we believe parents are capable of being the parent their children need them to be. And our mission is for children to be safe and families together. In Safe Families, we build relationships. We surround not only a child, but also the family with a circle of support. We're family-focused, not program-focused. We're not about check marks and marking the boxes and offering this and that. We're about that relationship to develop. Our vetted volunteers have quite a rigorous application process. They go through reference checks, training, FBI background checks, KBI background checks, fingerprint screenings, home walkthroughs, and we are also a licensed child placing agency through DCF, which provides an important layer of oversight and accountability. Thus far, Safe Families for Kansas has a 97% success rate in children returning home after being hosted. And when we talk about the 127 children not entering foster care, it means that 65 families did not experience trauma of separation. It means 68 volunteers had the opportunity to open their heart and home and begin developing enduring relationships with vulnerable families to be that resource when that next crisis comes, and it comes. We're also building our team in Kansas. At the close of 2021, Safe Families Kansas employed 5 people, including me. Today, we're fully staffed in the Kansas City metropolitan area, the Wichita metropolitan area, as well as Southeast Kansas. In the last year, we've also increased our intake line where a live person is there to answer the phone or respond to communication via email. Initially, we were Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Now we're 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which means we are available for that need, to respond to that need of help. 39 additional hours per week, or that equates to 2,028 hours per year. All of our success, majority of our success thus far, is in part to the generous support of the legislature and the support of DCF. When we talk about successes, that usually tends to lead to other opportunities. We are looking and holding community meetings in the McPherson, Kansas area. We're currently building relationships in the faith community, having discussions with the program director of the McPherson Housing Coalition. We're in communication and relationship with the Newton County Sheriff's Department, as well as their SROs, and we are planning to open a chapter in McPherson in mid-summer 2023. The officials from Fort Riley contacted Safe Families. They had 2 families transfer into Fort Riley. One was coming from Michigan, an Army base in Michigan. The other was coming from an Army base in San Diego. They came to Fort Riley. They're just so happen neighbors. They share a wall between their duplex, and both of those families were Safe Families, host families, in their respective bases prior to coming to Fort Riley. They know the impact that Safe Families can have, and they also understand the need for those services on base as well as the surrounding community. It's working with the community partners in the Manhattan, Fort Riley, Salina area, as well as DCF, the leadership in the northwest region of DCF, and the officials at Fort Riley. It is our desire to open a chapter as well there in 2023 midsummer. So my ask is to expand into McPherson, Manhattan, Salina, and Fort Riley, and I'm seeking $350,000 of additional support to do that. What's the return on this investment? Children being safe and families are together. I was initially going to share a story, but what I want to share is something my daughter shared with me this weekend. And it touched her, and she shared it with me, and it just screamed at me, really. And it was a statement that she had read, and it was, one of the bravest things a person can say is help. Because someone is asking for help doesn't mean they're giving up. Rather, someone asking for help is someone that's refusing to give up. And we want to be that help. We want to be that help that continues to grow in Kansas City, Wichita, and the Southeast. We also want to be that help that can be established and nurtured and cultivated in the western portions of our state as well as the McPherson area. Vice Chair Carpenter and this committee, I want to thank you for allowing me to provide an update on the progress of Safe Families, and I welcome questions.
Very good. Committee questions? Seeing none. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, for being here. Next, we have John Olise, Executive Director of the Hope Ranch for Women. John, welcome to committee. No stranger here.
Thank you, Vice Chairman and members. It is great to see you again, and some new faces. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you regarding what has been going on with Hope Ranch for Women as we seek to help women who have been sexually exploited and trafficked in this state. You have before you a written testimony, and so I don't want to read that to you, but I would just like to share a few comments and a few thoughts regarding that testimony before you. But first, I again just want to say thank you. 2 years ago, I stood here and provided testimony to you regarding the significant need for helping women to heal and to recover from this evil and this darkness. And because of you and because of your generosity, we are able to move forward with that. So thank you very much. If I had an hour, I could share a lot of stories. And since you don't mind, I'll just go ahead. But no, seriously, I would just like to share two. The first one is regarding a woman that I'm going to call Sue from Lawrence, Kansas, and I am protecting her, and so I'm changing a few things, but the basis of the story is so true. She came to our residential program a year ago. Sue's birth mom was a prostitute. And through Sue's upbringing, through grade school, and through middle school, and through high school, she was trafficked. All to support her mom's drug habit. 47%, a recent study came out, of all minor trafficking today is the result of a familial pimp. And we're seeing that play out as a reality at Hope Ranch for Women. But today, Sue is getting ready to graduate from our program a year later. She has been accepted at 4 colleges, has already received 2 full-ride scholarships to 2 of those 4, and she wants to become an elementary education teacher. And she said, John, I know firsthand the reality of what a grade school child goes through. I've lived it, and I know, and so I want to be able to help and walk alongside children like that that are experiencing that. I want to give back. That's the reality for Sue, and that's the reality for several others if I had time to share. One other story or one other update. This past year, we completely updated our community program. So besides our residential program, we have a community program, we have an equine program, but the community program, we're averaging around 15 women that we are engaged with right now. And this past year, as a result, you can see it on your sheet, but 5 women have secured Section 8 housing, 3 women secured higher wage jobs, 4 secured safe housing, 3 received their driver's license, 1 received their driver's license back, 1 regained custody of her children, 2 are pursuing child support, and 1 is seeking to attend a nursing program in the fall. We're grateful for the successes that we have had, but we also know that with the U.S. Justice Department identifying Kansas as an originating state for trafficking, that we have a long way to go. And so the question I would ask you as policymakers and as elected leaders is, how can you respond to this growing problem? And how can you not continue to fund organizations to help these women find healing and find hope? You know that we are a faith-based nonprofit that has received an A+ rating from the National Trafficking Sheltered Alliance, of which we are a member of. Today, we are asking for $300,000 to propel our organization forward, to invest in allowing us to make greater impact to prevent this evil from continuing. Thank you again for your support these years, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that there might be.
Very good. Thank you for that. Committee questions. Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you're aware, when we briefed this budget yesterday, we're informed that essentially you're in the wrong room because we're talking about DCF and not, adult trafficked people. And there was some indication that maybe this concept would be put out as an RFP by the state. Were you aware of that at all?
I'm aware that there's some discussion going on about the best group or best avenue of how to support that, and I leave that up to you guys, to process that and work that through. My expertise, if you will, is more in the arena of simply trying to tell you, here's the need, and we're doing everything we can to help it, and we need your support to continue.
Follow up, are you surviving on grants then, other grants, or is this
Yes.
300,000 your whole existence?
No, we received a $25,000 grant from United Way earlier this fall. We've applied for another $250,000 from United Way. We're working with the Wichita Nonprofit Chamber to look at other grant possibilities, trying to find funding that way. We also receive funding from churches, from individuals who are just supportive of our mission. And then we do some fundraising events throughout the year.
I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Representative Ruiz.
Thank you for your presentation. I believe last session, when you came to give us your presentation, didn't we get funding for like a pilot program?
Yes.
Okay. And then we asked that if you came back this session, we would get a report of a breakdown, a little bit more of a breakdown of your funding, and hoping to see that you would be able to, get funding from other sources, and decrease the need for the funding through the legislature.
Yeah, I presented a couple of written reports, but I'm not sure if that perhaps is not exactly what you were after. And I'd be happy to develop something else for you if that would be helpful. The reality is that the need is not going away. In fact, it's increasing. And so as much as we seek to try and find funding elsewhere, we received 2 more women into our residential program in the last 2 weeks, and we have another one coming this week. And so the need is just continuing to grow.
Absolutely, and totally understand, and, and I'm glad you're out there providing the services. Sure. But we did ask for more of a breakdown of how you were going to be able to sustain yourself, your agency. So we still need that.
Okay, I can get that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Rushner.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. You have indicated, yes, you had the 300,000, but also you have been receiving grants from other places as well as donations and everything else. Do you have a breakdown of how much you have raised that offsets this 300,000?
This past year, we raised 880,000 total. So 300,000 would have been the state grant, so 500,000 on top of that, approximately.
So you've been able to raise over 880,000?
This past year, we did, yes. Yes, and our budget for this next year is 920. Okay, sure.
Committee, further questions? Representative Barth.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you actually receive referrals and how people come to you and
Sure.
as well? That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So we receive women in a variety of ways. Some just contact us directly because the word of mouth, they know that we're here, and so they will contact us. We had a woman who contacted us a while ago from Wichita who, in the interview process, we found out that she had already been kidnapped twice by her pimp in Wichita. And so we said, it's not safe for you to be here. It's not safe for you or for the other women we're serving. But because we're part of this National Trafficking Shelter Alliance, we're going to refer you elsewhere and find a safe place for that. So we did that. So we also receive referrals because we have the A+ rating, which is the highest rating you can get with the NTSA. We receive referrals from them as well. Then we receive referrals from other social agencies, from the police, from the Topeka prison system. We have a very strong, very good relationship with the Topeka prison system, and so we receive women that way as well.
Any further? Representative Donahoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 years ago, you were awarded a grant from us, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now I understand there's not a process now in this committee. I don't know if it came out of this committee for a grant, correct? And Secretary Howard mentioned that there might be an RFP. So I'm confused as to what the status is of your organization versus participating like you did before under the grant. So do you have any knowledge of a request for an RFP or anything to provide or continue these services?
Since I'm not a politician, would you mind sharing with me what RFP means?
That's for proposal.
Request for proposal. Oh,
Bid.
okay. My understanding is that it is going to be requested for Hope Ranch to receive $300,000 from a legislator to move forward with that.
Well, again, part of the rationale was when we started that there would be the grant and then you would report
Sure.
back.
Right, right. And I did that last year. So
who?
to this committee last year.
Okay. Did anybody recall getting that?
I mean, it was live right here. I was here last year. Yep.
So was the request more of a formal response versus just a testimony? I mean, I understood we were going to be getting a, formal response based upon the criteria that was set up and everything. And obviously we've, other than your testimony, then I've not seen that. So I don't know the basis for which to evaluate. My whole point is I don't know how somebody else is going to be getting the grant when really the original one emanated from here. So I don't know how we're now out of the picture with regard to this when it seems that from what the testimony is that they did a good job. So rather confusing to me. Thank you.
Well, I might elaborate. That came from a committee rec from this committee, and I was primarily responsible for it after seeing that Kansas was ranked #1 in the nation for human trafficking. So that's how the first grant started. A series of criteria were put in place, reporting process and that kind of stuff were put into place. They've been doing a pretty good job. Since they've hired an accountant, they've been doing a better job at filing the reports and stuff like that. At that time, and I still believe it's relevant, there were no other folks in this state providing human trafficking services. I'm not aware of any at this point in time. That's kind of how it came about. Just to editorialize a little bit more, as I've done some looking into it, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it is very difficult to measure the outcomes of human trafficking just because of the nature of these folks and their upbringing and how they have been in the system. And a lot of times, I mean, this is just common sense, what we know. Some of these folks, they do not know anything else. You get them in these programs, they go through the program, it gets a little difficult to give up, the things that they've had. What do? They run out, they hit the streets, and they're right back to being trafficked and used and all that kind of stuff. So I will tell you, until I dug into it, I was very disappointed about how efficient the human trafficking is. But I will tell you, if you Google it and you look nationwide, this is a problem for human trafficking. There's just not that answer. But I'll go back to one thing. If we save one person a year for $300,000, it's well worth it. So I'll just get off my soapbox. But absent this, what do? So Representative Donahoe.
I'm going to put you back on your soapbox. So you originated the grant before. Why can't you do it again? Based upon the reports you've gotten, have they done a good job or have they not done a good job? And is there a recommendation to the committee for another grant or an RFP or whatever? How are they to proceed?
I plan on offering that in committee, whether that's going to be a committee decision, but I do plan on offering that.
All right, that's what I was trying to figure
So,
out what the status. Thank you,
And
Mr.
I
Chairman, thank you.
I've learned more about human trafficking than I ever wanted to know, but I do know that it's just an incredibly hard to get results that even I would have expected until you look at the whole human trafficking system and how hard it is to change people's basic nature of things that they've absolutely grown up with and don't know any different. So very disappointed as far as that goes, but the difference being, do we throw up our hands and just say it's not a problem, or do we try to address it? So that's what I'll say. John, thank you for that. Representative Clifford, on page 37 of the Department of Children and Families budget, there was a human trafficking prevention and protection services. If you look at the bottom of page 37 in the budget. And that's how human trafficking came to the Department of Children and Families.
You said what?
Just a question or point of order, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you pointing that out, and I am aware of an organization in Southwest Kansas that does deal with trafficking. I haven't heard anything here this afternoon that, except for Link in Hayes, that's within 200 miles of where I live and serve. How do folks, and maybe this is for next year, how do folks get on our dance card here at this committee? Because I certainly can bring plenty in myself from where I serve.
I missed what you said.
Well, we've cherry-picked certain organizations to show up to our committee to ask for enhancements. I could bring a dozen organizations from Southwest Kansas to this committee the same way, but I don't know the logistics of how people gain appearance here in front of us.
Well, I think it's a committee decision. As we just went through in the budgeting process with KDHE, individuals brought committee recs before the committee. The committee voted on them. Some of them made it, some of them didn't. I think that's the process. I'm just telling you that's my process anyway, and I think that's the process has been in this committee. Any representative can bring a committee rec to the budget requests when we have them. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the date when we're doing DCF. If it's the will of the committee, then that's how it works. If it's not, then that's how it works too.
I'm learning. I appreciate it.
So
Mr. Chairman.
bring your 200 requests and we'll take a look at them.
May I comment on that?
You may,
You know,
Representative Ballard.
interesting. I think people who watch the legislative process, I'll be very honest, I was shocked to see that Independence Inc. was here today. I had no idea they were coming, and neither did they tell me they were coming. But I think they've been watching the budgets or looking at when we have a hearing on DCF. And it's on the website. I mean, you can look at it to know when you're going to hear KDHE, DCF, and everything else, and people just show up, you know. I mean, I look at the list and go, oh, that's who's here today, you know. So I also believe you could recommend that this is going on and for people to come up, you know, and then they have to make arrangements and then find out how many handouts they have to get and everything else. But, you know, people put it in their newsletters, and there's all kind of things that they can do. But for the most part, I just take a little exception to cherry pick because I don't know anybody who has picked anybody to come to talk to them. I think people watch the process and everything else. But you could let them know that it was going on. And, you know, if there's some people that you think would be interested, I would let them know in my community, in my newsletter.
Representative Donahoe.
Yes, so.
Maybe you ought to just sit down. Thank you. I think this is thank you for
Citizens
being
for
here.
being-
This is kind of a committee discussion, and
Learning
we
more
appreciate your
about-
testimony.
I'm sorry, learning more about the trafficking. Are there any more organizations out there that you're aware of that now does what Hope Ranch did? Or are there becoming more of them?
I'm not aware of
Okay.
that, and that might be a good question for research to see if they could find some other providers of human trafficking services.
Right, because it kind of speaks to the fact that, as you said, if they saved one, well, that's better than nobody doing anything, so it would certainly justify something.
That's kind of how this came about, but I have to
I
tell you,
understand.
I was so disappointed because I just thought, we could just get people in there and they would be successful and they would turn their lives around. I mean, that was my thinking until I realized this is not a Kansas-only problem. This is nationwide, and you read about it. We're going to read about it in the papers tomorrow morning, and we're going to read about it. I mean, it's just an issue, and I don't have the silver bullet but I also don't feel like we should just throw up our hands and not address it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. There is no doubt, I mean, this is a horrendous issue, and it's something that, little by little, we are starting to be able to make an impact, and it's terrible that Kansas is number one, but it's Wichita area that I understand that where it's number one, and lots of reasons for that, but I just think that, the stories of the impact, the stories that we're getting of how the impact on the people that have been involved in the victims of trafficking, they're priceless. I mean, and it's wonderful to hear them, and we need to hear them. But I still think that we need to have more information regarding their budget, about how they're going to be able to sustain themselves a little bit more, because there are other organizations out there. And, I just, for the future, I don't know where it's going to go, but I think it would still be important for us to hear. It's good to hear that they now have a budget director, and so to be able to find out, how they're using their money, or at least the funds that we've given them, $350,000 before, and now $300,000. So I just think that we need that information.
Very good, thank you. Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think this is a really great conversation we're having right now, because human trafficking, and it's also, I actually have a bill that has a hearing tomorrow on human smuggling, and it's in Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee, and we don't have a law currently on that today. So it all kind of ties into what becomes trafficking of humans and drugs and other types of things. One of the things that never knew I was going to get this in depth and involved on these types of things, but I have foreseen that we will form a task force that is all encompassing of all the different parties and the different human trafficking types of boards, as well as folks like Homeland Security and the district attorneys and the police officers and the sheriffs and really KBI and the KTA, Highway Patrol. It will be something I think that we can do a lot more on and really bring more value to the table on even discussions like this and how we decide how we're going to fund and support these types of initiatives going forward. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for that, and also the Attorney General's office. Yes, and the Attorney General's office is on board with that too. They are, very good, thank you for that. Yeah, it's a difficult problem and very heart-wrenching when it comes to that kind of stuff. Committee, I'll bring your attention back to the agenda. There are written from 4 people, and follow that in your packet and read that at your leisure. And with that, no more questions. We're adjourned. Thank you.